Nobody expected this to happen, but it did, and it got ugly fast. Fans packed into the venue thinking they were about to witness a normal Drake performance. Instead, what unfolded shocked everyone in the building. Drake didn't just address Kendrick Lamar again. He broke down, cursed him out, and completely lost his composure in a moment that instantly went viral. Phones came out, security tensed up, and the entire energy of the show shifted in seconds. This wasn't planned. This wasn't scripted. This was raw emotion spilling out in real time. Eyewitnesses say Drake's voice cracked mid-sentence. His eyes looked glassy under the stage lights. At first, people thought it was just another subliminal jab, something fans are used to by now. But then the tone changed. Drake paused, shook his head, and went off script. The crowd went silent as he started venting about disrespect, betrayal, and how far things have gone. When Kendrick's name came up, that's when it got uncomfortable. Words flew. The emotion turned heavy, and whatever tension had been simmering between these two legends officially boiled over. What makes this moment so wild is the timing. This feud was supposed to be cooling off. Fans believed the shots were done, the lines were drawn, and both sides had moved on. But something clearly triggered Drake that night. Whether it was pressure, personal feelings, or something Kendrick did behind the scenes, it pushed him to a breaking point on stage, with thousands watching and millions about to replay it online. Social media exploded within minutes. Clips spread everywhere, with fans arguing over whether Drake was hurt, angry, or both. Some called it vulnerability, others called it weakness. And then there were those who said Kendrick had officially gotten under Drake's skin in a way nobody else ever has. Industry insiders immediately started speculating. Was this emotional outburst a sign the beef isn't over? Or did Drake just reveal more than he meant to in a moment he couldn't take back? This wasn't just another concert moment. This was a crack in the armor, a rare glimpse of how deep this rivalry really runs, and why it might be far more personal than anyone realized. Stay locked in, because once you understand what led up to this moment, why Drake snapped, and how Kendrick's shadow loomed over that stage, everything about this feud starts to make terrifying sense. The moment Drake stepped back from the microphone, the crowd felt it. Something was off. This wasn't the usual controlled, polished superstar energy fans were used to. The music faded lower than expected. The lights stayed dim, and Drake stood there longer than necessary, staring out into the audience as if he was searching for something or someone. When he finally spoke, his voice didn't carry confidence. It carried weight. People near the stage later said they could see his hands shaking slightly, and the silence in the venue grew heavier by the second. At first, it sounded like reflection. Drake talked about pressure, about carrying expectations that never seemed to lift. He mentioned how people smile in your face but move differently when your back is turned. The crowd reacted with cheers, assuming this was another emotional monologue before a deep cut. But then his tone hardened. His words sharpened. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. This wasn't just storytelling anymore. This was frustration breaking through a carefully built image. When he alluded to fake kings and people who hide behind respect, the room buzzed. Fans knew exactly who he was referring to, even before Kendrick's name came up. Drake paused again, jaw clenched, as if debating whether to continue. That hesitation made everything worse, because when he finally spoke again, there was no filter left. He cursed, not casually, not for emphasis, but with anger, the kind that comes from something unresolved, something personal that's been sitting heavy for a long time. Eyewitnesses say the crowd froze. Some people cheered instinctively. Others went silent, unsure if they were witnessing a moment of vulnerability or complete loss of control. Drake's voice cracked as he spoke, and that's when the emotion crossed into dangerous territory. Tears welled up under the stage lights, and instead of wiping them away or stepping back, he leaned into the moment. That rawness made the energy in the building uncomfortable. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It felt like a confrontation happening in public. Security tightened near the stage. Phones were everywhere. Clips were being uploaded before Drake even finished speaking. He didn't care. He kept going. He talked about being tested, about people pushing narratives, about respect being twisted into competition. And every time he circled back to the same idea, the message became clearer. Whatever was happening with Kendrick wasn't just about music anymore. It had crossed into pride, legacy, and identity. What shocked fans most was how direct he became without fully naming names. He didn't need to. The subtext was loud. Years of comparisons, debates, rankings, and industry favoritism had finally boiled over. Drake wasn't just reacting to one diss or one moment. He was reacting to a decade of pressure, criticism, and being measured against someone who represents the opposite of everything he's been accused of being. As the rant continued, his emotions bounced between anger and hurt. One second he was aggressive, the next he sounded exhausted. People in the front rows described it as watching someone crack under a weight nobody else could see. This wasn't about winning a feud. This was about being tired of having to prove himself over and over again, even after dominating charts, tours, and culture for years. The crowd eventually tried to bring the energy back with cheers, chants, and applause. Drake nodded, took a breath, and attempted to transition back into the performance. But the damage was already done. The moment had escaped the room. Social media was on fire. Fans were split instantly, some praising him for showing real emotion, others saying he let Kendrick get to him in the worst possible way. As the beat dropped for the next song, Drake performed, but something had changed. The confidence felt forced. The smiles didn't last. Between verses, he kept glancing toward the crowd as if checking reactions in real time. The show went on, but everyone knew they had just witnessed something rare and irreversible. A crack in the image. A public unraveling that would be replayed, debated, and dissected endlessly. By the time the show ended, the damage was already spreading. Clips of Drake's emotional outburst were everywhere, chopped into seconds-long videos designed to hit harder than the full context ever could. One clip showed his voice cracking. Another zoomed in on his eyes, visibly watery under the stage lights. Another captured the exact moment he cursed, the crowd gasping before erupting. Within minutes, timelines were flooded with opinions, hot takes, and arguments, each one louder than the last. Fans rushed to choose sides. Some defended Drake, calling it human, real, and long overdue. They said people forget the pressure of living under constant comparison, the weight of being measured against another legend every single year. Others weren't as forgiving. They called it a breakdown, a loss of composure, proof that Kendrick had gotten inside his head without even lifting a finger. The phrase, "he won without responding," started trending, and that alone made the moment feel even more brutal. Industry insiders paid close attention. Artists, producers, and executives understood what the public didn't. Moments like this change narratives fast. Drake had always been criticized for being too calculated, too polished, too aware of his image. But this wasn't polish. This was raw emotion in front of thousands, and now millions more online. Some insiders believed the vulnerability could humanize him and shift public sympathy. Others warned it could be used against him, framing him as emotionally unstable in a rivalry that thrives on perception and control. Behind the scenes, phones were ringing nonstop. Management, PR teams, and close associates scrambled to figure out the next move. Should Drake address the moment publicly? Should he stay silent and let it fade? Every option carried risk. Silence could be read as regret or embarrassment. Speaking out could reopen the wound and invite Kendrick to respond. The wrong decision could turn one emotional moment into a full-blown spiral. What made everything worse was the timing. Kendrick hadn't released anything new. There was no fresh diss, no recent interview, no obvious provocation. That left fans speculating wildly about what triggered Drake. Some believed something had happened backstage earlier that day. Others pointed to industry whispers, private conversations, or moves made quietly behind the scenes. The lack of clarity gave the internet space to invent its own version of events, and those versions spread faster than facts ever could. As debates raged online, older footage resurfaced. Past interviews, old lyrics, moments where Drake brushed off comparisons with Kendrick, all of it was stitched together to form a new narrative. People weren't just reacting to what happened to the show, They were rewriting the entire history of the rivalry in real time. Every moment of confidence from the past was now contrasted with this emotional outburst, and the shift in perception was immediate. Some fans noticed something else that night. Drake kept performing, but he didn't look free. His movements were stiff. His interactions with the crowd felt measured, almost defensive. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was as if he knew the internet was already dissecting him, judging him frame by frame. That awareness only added to the tension, turning the rest of the show into a balancing act between control and emotion. Meanwhile, Kendrick's silence became the loudest part of the story. No tweets, no posts, no response from his camp. That quiet fueled the narrative even more. People began saying Kendrick didn't need to say anything, that Drake had said enough for both of them. Memes exploded. Commentary channels dissected the psychology of the moment, calling it a rare case of an artist losing the upper hand without a direct confrontation. Within hours, the moment stopped being about a concert and became a referendum on legacy. Who handles pressure better? Who really controls the narrative? Who wins when emotions spill into public view? Drake's supporters argued that honesty takes strength. Critics argued that real power is silence. And caught between those arguments was an artist whose emotions had been broadcast to the world at the worst possible moment. As the night turned into morning, one thing became clear. This wasn't going to fade quietly. The footage was too raw, the reactions were too intense, and the rivalry was too deep. Drake hadn't just cursed Kendrick at a show. He had cracked open a door that couldn't be closed again. Whatever happened next, whether it came in the form of music, silence, or something unexpected, the balance had shifted, and everyone was waiting to see if Kendrick would finally step into the moment, or let the silence do the damage for him. The aftermath of that night didn't just linger, it exploded. Clips of Drake's emotional outburst went viral on every platform imaginable. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube feeds were flooded with frame-by-frame breakdowns of his reactions. Analysts and fans alike dissected his every word, gesture, and expression. Every phrase, every curse, every tear became fodder for debate. Some people called it raw honesty, others called it a public meltdown. Either way, the conversation wasn't slowing down. It was accelerating, and Drake's image, carefully curated for over a decade, was suddenly under an intense microscope. Fans began replaying older moments, searching for context. They dug up interviews, past concerts, and even casual studio clips, looking for evidence that Drake had been holding this tension for years. The narrative that emerged wasn't about a single night. It was about a decade-long comparison between two of the biggest figures in hip-hop. Every lyric, every subliminal jab, and every industry rumor suddenly felt like part of a long-running story that had reached its emotional tipping point. What people were seeing on stage wasn't a random breakdown. It was the culmination of years of pressure, scrutiny, and rivalry. Inside Drake's camp, the mood was tense. Managers, PR teams, and close advisors scrambled to contain the situation while also understanding its impact. Lawyers analyzed whether any lines crossed legal boundaries, while PR experts debated whether to release statements or let the story run its course. The question was complicated. Every move could either soften public perception or inflame it further. One wrong step could turn a moment of vulnerability into a lasting stain on his legacy. Behind closed doors, Drake was described as reflective but elate, trying to process both the emotional intensity of the night and the relentless scrutiny that followed. Meanwhile, the streets and the industry reacted in real time. Commentary channels dissected the emotional nuances like a psychological case study. Fans debated whether this showed strength or weakness, and the discussion spilled into forums, group chats, and comment sections worldwide. Every opinion seemed to be amplified tenfold, creating a feedback loop that made the story feel alive. Some argued that Drake had revealed a side of himself the public rarely sees, a side fueled by raw emotion, stress, and pride. Others claimed it was a sign that Kendrick had finally pushed him to a breaking point, highlighting the psychological tension behind the feud. As the analysis continued, the pressure on both artists intensified. Kendrick remained silent publicly, and that silence only added fuel to the fire. Every rumor, every speculation about a response, and every meme circulating online magnified the intensity. Silence became strategic. Silence became powerful. The public couldn't stop imagining what he might say or do, and that anticipation made Drake's emotional display even more amplified in contrast. Fans and critics began framing the rivalry as a mental game as much as a musical one. The drama wasn't just in lyrics or performances. It was in perception. Backstage sources described the atmosphere in the arena as surreal. Crew members reported that the energy shifted mid-show. Some fans became uncertain, unsure how to react to a performer revealing so much emotion live. Others felt electrified, witnessing an authenticity rarely seen in a superstar of Drake's magnitude. The combination of vulnerability and aggression created a tension that hovered over the venue long after the final song ended. Security had to stay alert, not because of danger from the crowd, but because the intensity of emotion itself was palpable, an energy that could ignite in unexpected ways. Industry insiders noted that this night would likely be remembered for years. Not for a hit song, not for a record-breaking tour, but for the raw, unfiltered display of human emotion at the center of one of hip-hop's most prominent rivalries. It was a moment that exposed the delicate balance between public image and personal feelings. The fallout was immediate. Conversations about respect, influence, and legacy dominated the news cycle, while memes and reaction videos ensured that the story stayed alive across all corners of the internet. Drake's vulnerability sparked empathy in some quarters and criticism in others. Some claimed it was a rare glimpse into the human side of a global superstar, a reminder that fame doesn't make anyone immune to pressure, judgment, or rivalry. Others argued it revealed cracks in his armor, opportunities for Kendrick or others in the industry to gain psychological leverage. The complexity of perception became the story itself. It wasn't just a feud, it was a study in strategy, emotion, and public narrative, played out under the scrutiny of millions. Even days later, the impact continued to resonate. Clips of the outburst were being referenced in podcasts, news segments, and social media threads, each time analyzed and reinterpreted. Fans debated how this would affect future shows, collaborations, and even the trajectory of the ongoing rivalry. It was clear, the emotional display at that one concert had created ripples far beyond the stage, forcing both artists, their teams, and their audiences to confront the deeper human dynamics behind fame, competition, and pride. The days after that concert felt like a hurricane had hit the music world. Social media was ablaze with clips, comments, and hot takes, and the feud between Drake and Kendrick had somehow taken on a life of its own. Fans dissected every frame of the performance, analyzing his every gesture and word. Analysts debated the psychology of the moment, calling it either a powerful display of vulnerability or career misstep. No one could agree. Some claimed Drake had shown raw human emotion, while others argued he had let Kendrick get under his skin in the worst possible way. Either way, the conversation dominated timelines, and no one could look away. Inside Drake's camp, tension ran high. Advisors, managers, and PR teams worked overtime, trying to strategize a response that wouldn't make things worse. Every statement, every Instagram post, and every public interaction was scrutinized for potential damage or opportunity. The pressure wasn't just about public perception. It was about controlling a narrative that could shift the balance of the rivalry in real time. One slip, one unguarded tweet, could reignite the feud in ways nobody wanted. Meanwhile, Kendrick's silence was deafening. The lack of response only amplified the tension. Fans began speculating endlessly about what he was thinking, whether he was planning a calculated counter or simply letting Drake's moment speak for itself. That silence became a weapon. It forced Drake to confront the reality that in this rivalry, perception was everything, and every emotional reaction could be magnified, dissected, and weaponized by the public. The streets mirrored the online chaos. Conversations in studios, radio stations, and neighborhoods buzzed with theories and predictions. Some saw Drake's emotional moment as a sign of vulnerability, proof that even a superstar can be rattled by years of comparison. Others interpreted it as a signal that the rivalry had reached new heights, and that the tension between the two artists wasn't just about music. It was about pride, legacy, and psychological dominance. The energy was electric, and every new clip added another layer of speculation. Even in private, Drake felt the weight of the moment. Sources close to him described long hours spent reflecting on the performance, analyzing every reaction, and preparing for the inevitable discussions with his team. Legal advisors, PR specialists, and creative directors were all consulted, because in a feud this high-profile, every word and action carried potential consequences. The performance had been a flashpoint, and it was clear that this wasn't going to fade quietly. Fans and critics alike began turning every minor interaction into evidence. A glance at the wrong time, a vague lyric in a recent track, or an Instagram story could be interpreted as a jab, a response, or warning. The feud was no longer contained to the stage. It had expanded into every corner of the culture. Artists, commentators, and influencers debated motives and strategy, making the rivalry feel omnipresent. Even casual listeners felt pulled into the drama, as if they were witnesses to a narrative bigger than the music itself. Compounding the chaos, insider reports suggested that tensions backstage were also rising. Crew members, collaborators, and supporting artists were caught between loyalty and survival. Some worried that the feud might spill into their own work, while others feared that choosing sides could damage relationships with one or both superstars. The personal stakes were high, and the emotional fallout extended far beyond the two artists on stage. At the same time, media coverage intensified. Headlines framed the moment in bold, dramatic language. Drake breaks down on stage, or Kendrick's silent domination. Analysts broke down the lyrics, the body language, and the timeline, each adding their interpretation to the growing public narrative. Social media amplified the coverage, ensuring that nothing would be forgotten quickly. Even those who weren't fans of either artist found themselves caught up in the drama, drawn to the spectacle of two global icons navigating emotion, ego, and reputation under a public microscope. As the tension continued, a new sense of urgency emerged. Drake's team began preparing not only for potential responses from Kendrick, but also for the long-term impact on his career and public perception. Concerts, interviews, and collaborations were all reviewed with extra scrutiny. Every decision was strategic, calculated to stabilize his image while also addressing the emotional moment that had captured the world's attention. It was clear that the stakes were higher than ever, and the fallout from that one emotional night was far from over. The streets, the industry, and the fans were all watching. Every new post, every subtle lyric, and every reaction from either side could reignite the drama. What had started as a single, emotional outburst had grown into the tension that had been simmering for weeks finally reached a breaking point. Every clip of Drake's emotional outburst was replayed endlessly, and every reaction online added fuel to a fire that seemed impossible to contain. Fans debated whether he had shown vulnerability, weakness, or brilliance, while critics argued that he had let Kendrick dominate the narrative without even responding. And through it all, Kendrick stayed silent. That silence became louder than any verse, any lyric, or any public statement could have been. It was a calculated move, and the world noticed. Every second Drake remained publicly vulnerable made the silence from Kendrick feel like a strategic victory. Inside Drake's camp, the atmosphere was electric and tense. Advisors, PR teams, and close collaborators worked around the clock to assess the damage, manage perception, and prepare for the next move. Social media was no longer just a platform, it was a battlefield. Every post, every story, every subtle public interaction had the potential to either stabilize the narrative or spiral it further out of control. The team debated endlessly. Should Drake address Kendrick directly, release a statement, drop a track, or simply let the silence speak for itself? Each option had consequences that could ripple through the industry and the streets alike. Meanwhile, the fan base had fractured. Some rallied behind Drake, praising his honesty and courage for expressing emotion in front of thousands. Others argued that he had been outmaneuvered by Kendrick, a silent rival who had mastered the art of psychological pressure. Memes circulated endlessly, interviews were dissected for hidden meanings, and TikTok videos analyzed every glance and gesture. The feud was no longer about music. It had become a study in strategy, perception, and control. Every observer, whether casual fan or industry insider, felt compelled to pick a side. The stakes became even higher when reports surfaced that both artists were preparing for a face-to-face encounter, whether planned or accidental. Rumors of a private studio session, a meeting at an award show, or a festival clash ignited online speculation. People debated what would happen if the two finally came face-to-face. Would tempers flare, words be exchanged, or would the silence finally break in a public, unforgettable moment? Every scenario played out in fans' minds, and every reaction online became a prediction, a theory, or a warning. Backstage and in private, Drake was reportedly focused and introspective. Sources described him reviewing the performance repeatedly, analyzing how his emotions had been perceived and preparing for any possible fallout. He was cautious but determined, aware that the world had seen a side of him few had ever witnessed. The emotional moment had left a mark, but he was intent on controlling the next chapter of the story. It wasn't just about proving something to Kendrick. It was about controlling his own narrative in front of millions of people who were watching, judging, and waiting for the next move. Kendrick's silence continued to dominate the narrative. Fans speculated endlessly. Was it a sign of confidence, a tactical decision, or a psychological game designed to unnerve Drake? The more he said nothing, the more the story grew. Analysts, influencers, and commentators debated the implications, turning the feud into a cultural phenomenon that transcended music. The pressure wasn't just on Drake, it was on the entire industry. Watching how two of the biggest names in hip-hop navigated emotion, reputation, and strategy in the public eye. As days passed, Drake began to recalibrate. Social media clips, articles, and fan reactions were studied carefully. Decisions about interviews, collaborations, and appearances were made with precision. The goal was clear: reclaim control, shift perception, and show that the emotional moment did not define him, but rather demonstrated his complexity as an artist and a human being. Every subtle move, every statement, every lyric that followed was designed to balance vulnerability with authority, emotion with strategy. Finally, the cultural tension reached a climax. Drake performed again, this time with a renewed sense of control. The audience, aware of the previous incident, watched closely. This performance was different. Every gesture, every look, every lyric carried weight. Fans cheered not just for the music, but for the resilience, for the ability to navigate a public emotional moment and emerge with poise. Meanwhile, Kendrick remained silent in public forums, letting the performance speak for itself. That combination of vulnerability and composure shifted the narrative. Drake hadn't lost. It had been a masterclass in public emotion, strategy, and human complexity. By the end of the week, the story had settled into a new rhythm. Social media continued to debate, but the narrative shifted. Drake's emotional moment was no longer seen as a loss. It was part of a larger story of pressure, rivalry, and resilience. Kendrick's silence remained powerful, but Drake's ability to navigate the aftermath without further escalation earned him respect across the board. What started as a shocking outburst became a defining chapter in one of hip-hop's most watched rivalries, a reminder that fame, rivalry, and emotion are never as simple as they seem. What just went down with Drake on that stage was unreal, and the fallout is far from over. We saw him curse out Kendrick, break down in front of thousands, and show a side of himself the world rarely gets to see. This wasn't just a concert moment. This was a cultural event, a window into a rivalry that's as personal as it is legendary. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think really triggered Drake? Was it pent-up frustration, years of comparisons, or something Kendrick did behind the scenes? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't hold back. This feud has fans split and the internet buzzing like never before. Hit that like button if you were shocked by the outburst, subscribe for the full breakdowns, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates on this epic saga. Trust us, the story isn't over yet, and the next chapter could change everything.